Tomorrow night, President Obama will speak to the nation, tell us his plan to combat ISIS. And from ISIS to Iraq to Syria, here's what President Obama has said about his foreign policy in the past.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
I determined that it is in the national security interests of the United States to respond to the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons through a targeted military strike.
I also asked Congress to postpone a vote on the use of military force while we pursue this diplomatic path. That's what we're doing.
Iraq's future will be in the hands of its people. America's war in Iraq will be over. Today I authorized 2 operations in Iraq.
We don't have a strategy yet.
Our objective is clear, and that is to degrade and destroy ISIL. We can continue to shrink ISIL's sphere of influence, its effectiveness, its financing, its military capabilities, to the point where it is a manageable problem.
And Senator Lindsey Graham joins us. Nice to see you, sir.
You could have. That was very well done.
Well, I'm curious. Not that foreign policy should be reduced to some catchy phrase or slogan, but how do you describe President Obama's foreign policy? What's his ideology?
I think his ideology is basically not to be Bush.
And that means what?
Don't use a heavy footprint, use diplomacy, don't be a cowboy, use a professorial approach to problems, be contemplative, and it's caught up with him.
And I was just going to say, how's that worked out for us?
Not very well. Tomorrow night he's got 2 tasks: to convince the American people, the Congress, and our allies to follow him now. And he's got a trust and competency deficit that's been built up. Who would trust this guy, given pulling out of Iraq when he was told you need to leave some troops behind? He did refer to ISIS as the JV team. Competency, he's ignored his national security team regarding training the Free Syrian Army 3 years ago. He ignored his commanders when it came to leaving a force behind in Iraq. He left Syria in a mess. So to persuade the American people and our allies, he's got to overcome this deficit.
Well, you know, I give him a lot of credit for getting Osama bin Laden. I mean, I realize our SEALs did it, but
Right.
he gave the order.
You should give him credit for that.
But aside from that, I'm trying to think, where are we better off in the world?
Well, there are more terrorist organizations with more money, more capability, more desire, more safe havens than before 9/11. Tomorrow night's an important moment in his presidency. He's got to speak to our enemies. And I think our enemies see and hear weakness. When he talks about destroying our enemies, he then goes into what he won't do. You've got to instill fear and respect as president. I think he's lost both fear and respect from our enemies. And when it comes to our allies, the American people, and the Congress, he's not trusted, and people see him as incompetent.
Well, there have been some questions posed, like a recent poll, Washington Post ABC News poll. On balance, do you feel the Obama's presidency so far has been more of a success or more of a failure? Success, 42%, now failure, 52%. So he doesn't exactly have the wind behind his back with the American people.
No, and all of this thing, this is a problem of his own making. When you draw red lines and you do nothing about it, when when you overrule your national security team and you don't listen to your military commanders, every bet he's made has blown up in his face. And now he's got to go from leading from behind in the backseat of the car reading a newspaper to convince the free world to follow me now.
What does the military think? I know that, I mean, when you're not a U.S. Senator, you're still a reserve officer. Is that right description? What does the military think of the president?
Well, you know, they're loyal to the Constitution, which is that they follow orders of their commander-in-chief. I can tell you that former military leaders who have been successful in Iraq and Afghanistan believe that this strategy that the president's about to announce is going not to be successful. You can't have a campaign against a terrorist army and talk about what you want to do. There is no Arab army or military in the world that can defeat ISIL in Syria without some American ground component. And what bothers me,
boots on the ground?
You got to have boots on the ground. The worst possible thing is to take these guys on and lose. He's been weak and indecisive in the face of threats from Putin and terrorists. He's been untrustworthy when it comes to explaining, you know, what happened, setting red lines and not following through. It's all caught up with him, and I'm pulling for him. Why? Because if we don't get this right, they're coming here.
Senator, nice to see you, sir. That's a rather bleak message. We'll see what he does tomorrow night, though.